Hi, it's Kamon Reynolds, and welcome to today's live chat. I usually say tonight, but it's just a little bit after the middle of the day here in Tennessee, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we're glad that you're joining us either now live or in the future watching this video. So in beekeeping, there's a lot of changes that happen over the years. This is my 23rd, 24th season, somewhere in that area. And during that time, we've seen many changes in pests, different products for those pests. Our knowledge on different acids is hopefully increased, and I think it's going to increase more today. And that's primarily what this talk is about, is a better understanding of oxalic acid. And I'm very excited about our guest. He's going to be talking a lot about not only vaporizers, but how oxalic acid works in relation and all the dynamics there. It's really fascinating. I think it's critical that we know these things so that as we are treating the mites or treating into our hives, that we kind of have an idea of what we can do to better take care of our bees and control the mites even better. Before we get started, though, I want to say we have a special giveaway, and it's going to end on the 15th of this month. And there's three things that you could win. You could win either one, a 50% off the new Instant Vap Turbo. You could win a Instant Vap Lite. This is more for your hobby beekeeper, and it is also made by the Instant Vap company. And then we also are going to give away one North American Honeybee Expo ticket. So Chris has just put the form down below, and you just fill out a little bit of information. And on the 15th, we will be emailing and also doing a video announcing the winner. And you'll be winning one of those. So there'll be three different winners. So good luck with that. Be sure to enter. And also in the top comment of this video, we're going to put that form. So if you're watching this afterwards, you can watch this, get that. And then we're also going to have a link to 5% off the Instant Vap vaporizers. So if you have a need to get a new vaporizer, an upgrade, you can get 5% off through that link here in the United States. So without further ado, let's bring on our guest, Mr. Janos. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Kamon. Thank you very much.
So before we get into the vaporizers, how did you get into making and creating these things? I mean, if you've been doing this your whole life, or kind of tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I grew up my father was a beekeeper, so I was always surrounded by bees, and I was really waiting for having my own garden and then having my own bees. So after I bought my land, I didn't have a house yet, but right away I bought some, like 6 colonies, and I started keeping bees. And uh, I wanted to go organic. I didn't want to continue with formic acid, not formic acid. Uh,
Maybe the Amatraz or
Yes, antitrust-based stuff. One reason for that was that one year all the colonies of my father died, like 35 colonies, due to antitrust resistance, I believe.
mm-hmm.
And so I started investigating this issue. I bought first a vaporizer, which was a heat gun type, and the temperature was really not well regulated. The quantity was you had to put in a big quantity of oxalic acid. You wait like 6 minutes till it warms up, started to blow the smoke, and then you just go through your colonies, and I was losing colonies, so that was not working. And then after that, I bought a Provoc device, just like your 110 version here in 230, and I started using that. And after I already kind of had an issue with the previous one, I was not very happy about the overheating part of it, and I started thinking whether that can be designed better. And as having engineering background, electrical engineering background, I started experimenting at home, taking video of it, analyzing it, and after a couple of weeks, I saw that it can be done much better than that. So I really focused on the battery type one because I heard many reports that it was impossible to make it. So that was a challenge for me. And after some trials, I saw that it can be even better than the cold version. So I started experimenting with that. And after I saw that it has a feasibility, especially when I visited a beekeeper who had like 300 colonies, and he had 2 generators, 4 vaporizers, and he was running around but not really doing efficient work. But he was happy that he's so busy. And I saw that now it's not the right way to do it. And he had to move like 100 meters away to vaporize another 50 colonies. He had to pack up the cords, the generators, put it on the back of the truck, drive there, open up everything. And I said, this, there's a gap here. This is not right. So I jumped on it and I started getting serious about it. And after I had my first device and it was received well, I gave up my previous job. I was leading engineers and started full time in this business.
Wow. Congratulations. You know, we really appreciate the innovation. We don't have a lot of new companies that come in the area of miticides, and also that not only do that, but create a product that is going to push things forward in our industry. You mentioned the good old days where we were using generators or hooking up to a car battery, and that's what we were doing. I had a Subaru, and I would hook up an inverter to it, plug in some cords, and I'd run that out. And you're tripping over cords, rolling up cords. Uh, I had an inverter that was incorrect the first time, and it blew out the thermostat in one of my old vaporizers and just blew it right up. And I've had several issues with some other models, and that's something that I'm going to say to everyone who I guess gives two darns about my opinion. But I've owned several vaporizers, but I've never yet had any issue with yours, and so that's really impressive to me. I've had multiple thermostats go out in other vaporizers within less than 2 seasons of using them. I've also had just some other things, especially the old copper barrels. Of course, everything used to have a copper barrel on it, and eventually, at some point, you accidentally bump it a little bit, and it bends the barrel, and over time, it just gets weaker and weaker. And so, I really love the brass threaded barrels on these vaporizers. And so, whether it's something as maybe as small as a different style of nozzle, it really long term makes a big difference to how easy it is for me to fool with it, how forgiving the tool is, and also the plunger up on top, helping make that much quicker and not having to use a little scoop and have a little cup. It just put it back in, hit it. I filmed a video yesterday using the turbo, and I'm gonna be sweating trying to keep up with that unit. It's just like boom, 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 one hive. I did it on a 4-way pallet, and I went through the pallet. I think I spent as much time moving between around the pallet as I did actually vaporizing because it was so fast. So thank you for creating all of this.
That's my joy.
So we've got a question here, and I just wanted to say that we're going to be answering this. So Wally says, "Good day, Kamon. Hi, Janos. Need info about oxalic acid temp phase change after 375 degrees Fahrenheit. What temp should we use?" And Janos, do you want to wait and do that in your presentation, or do you want to take that now?
I think we should see the presentation and then it will be clear.
Yes.
And I think I would want to say it now before I forget it because it's not in the presentation that we will see a lot of things and we understand it a bit deeper what is going on when we vaporize and how much oxalic acid decomposes or degrades. But what is important is that we should not just randomly change the temperature of our vaporizers because it may have not been designed to be raised to certain temperatures. And then you get failures and then the warranty will not cover that. So I really recommend that you go back to your manufacturer or the dealer you bought it from and you ask the question. You can ask the question about the Instant Vap, but not from the other brands. And the other thing is that sometimes the temperature sensors are not at the best place and they are not actually showing the accurate temperature. So that can also fool you around that you change it and you are maybe. So anyway, I just want to be cautious that I'm talking about my devices where I had the experience. and it applies here. And if you want to do anything else, then you really need to get back to your manufacturer.
That makes sense. And so that's, yeah. So just like he said, all this technical data is based primarily on these units and how they're done and how the temperature works. And this is what's so unique is we've never had this before. And so it's kind of cutting edge. And so anybody who's using a different company's vaporizer, you really need to reach out to them and see if they're willing to do some tests to make sure that it's dialed in to where you're not degrading oxalic acid. So we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Let's go ahead and get this presentation rocking and rolling. There's a lot of information here, so hang on, everybody. And we're going to have questions and answers at the end of this. So be sure to have any questions, and we'll take them. All right, Janos, it is yours.
Thank you. So we can measure the efficiency of a tool in different ways. We can measure how much oxalic acid you have on the beads. You can look at the mite drop. You can look at, when do you reach a certain mite level. But I think you are measuring a lot of noise when you do that, because it's just like you want to measure the gas output or what kind of gases are coming out from your exhaust from a car, and you're not measuring at the exhaust, but you're measuring, the air of the garage. So you are introducing a lot of variables, and I think that's why I kind of went back to the source and I said, first we need to see what actually comes out of the tool, what is the input and what is the output. So I started investigating this issue of what is the efficacy of a device, and do we get oxalic acid or formic acid, or in what ratio at what temperature. So this will be the main topic of this presentation. Just a couple of words about oxalic acid. It's a natural acid. It's in many ways we apply it to kill mites in the hive. It's also effective to Trochilus, by the way, but hopefully we don't need that for a long time. It's in plants. It's also naturally in the honey, so it's not something foreign to the bees or to our nature. And we use it in beekeeping in dehydrate form, which means that about 1/3 of it is water, water crystallization, and it's easily absorbs water, so it's advisable to close the lid of the box where we use it, otherwise it will pick up too much moisture from the air. And just a little bit of safety caution that it's really important to wear full face respirator and to have the special cartridges which are for acids, and you need to have gloves, and that is not I have seen video, and you can find it on YouTube, that people not wearing gloves and they burn themselves. Accidents always happen. It was still boiling and he was bending it over, and it all went on his hand, and like big part just burned down. It's just ugly. It's not a toy. And also it's good if you have like a long sleeved shirt or something like that, so your skin is not irritated by that. Okay, so it looks like a sugar powder, and yeah, that's how it looks like. So we have like dozens or even maybe more than that type of vaporizers available on the market. Each of them are working at different temperatures. Some of them we have no idea what temperature it is working at, and everybody is claiming that their tool is the best. And I have seen some dangerous direction the market went as far as trying to make a fast vaporizer, and sometimes you can reach that by putting the temperature sensor at a funny place where you're not measuring the right temperature, and it becomes fast, but your consumers are still happy, or your beekeepers, buyers, that they are confident that they are using the well established temperature of 230 degrees or 445, which was kind of developing among beekeepers. But so anyway, I wanted to establish it and make a scientific grounding of it, so that we are not relying on opinions anymore. What do we read about temperature and degradation of oxalic acid? when I look at beekeeping, channels and all these informations, what we hear is that at 100 degrees, the crystal water starts to boil. So you get like a boiling oxalic acid. And at 157.5 degrees, it starts to sublimate or it starts to vaporize. And then at 189 degrees, it begins to decompose rapidly into formic acid, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and water. And I was really seeing these values all over the place, but not knowing where do they come from. So I was trying to understand that, and I understood that in chemistry, what they do, they have an analysis called thermogravimetric analysis (TGA), where they put a sample of a material into this small scale. They have a temperature sensor next to it, and they have a big thermal mass heated body, and they close it down, completely seal it, and then they heat it up slowly. And they look at the weight loss, and they look at also the heat absorption. And from that, they can work out where does it starts to boil, to decompose, and from that, we can learn a lot. And that's what they did with oxalic acid. And somebody from a university called Barna Kovac was kind enough to do this test for me, and it gave back these very similar results what we read before. So what happens is that it is warmed up with 10 degrees per minute rate. So the heating rate is very slow. And what we see is that as we are warming it up, the blue is the weight loss and the black is the heat absorption of the sample. And as we are warming it up, you have an increasing faster and faster weight loss as the crystal water is boiling up. There is a peak at 130 degrees where the heat absorption is the most. And then as the crystal water is gone, then it levels out the heat absorption. And this is when it starts to sublimate, because now you have a dry oxalic acid. It doesn't have the water of crystallization. And what is very interesting is that, yes, around 160, probably at 157.5, as they say, but I can't kind of verify that here. We have a very sudden increase of weight loss as well as heat absorption. And that's when it starts to actually decompose. And you can see that more and more heat is taken up. There is a peak at 199 degrees, which is interesting because that's actually the melting point of the oxalic acid crystal. So there's a melting point, not only the oxalic acid dehydrate at 100 degrees as water starts boiling, but the oxalic acid itself has a melting point. Anyway, so there's a peak, and then as you have less and less material, then you have less and less heat absorption, and your weight is zeroing down. So you have a complete decomposition. And this entire test took 19 minutes. And if you put in a bigger quantity, then these will slightly shift right or left, depending on whether you put in more or less. But this is the main kind of graph you get when you do this test. And what is clear is that this doesn't help us too much, because when we vaporize, we are never warming it up, even if it's a pan type vaporizer, 10 degrees per minute, because then you would have like 25 minutes to vaporize one colony. We don't do that. It takes 2-3 minutes even for the slowest vaporizer. And if you compare like a pizza, you can cook it in 15 or 25 minutes. If you are warming it up at, put it cold, you warm it up slowly to 200, 220 degrees. If you have like a real Italian pizza oven, it's like much hotter, and it only takes 2-3 minutes. And they should not argue about each other, which is you should not cook it more than 2-3 minutes, but the other person is cooking it at much lower temperature. So anyway, you can't compare this data which we get from the chemistry books with reality, what we do in beekeeping. So we should forget those. Those are nice values. It's good that we understand where they are coming from, but we have to do our own measurements to actually learn what is going on. So we hear some people are saying like 200 degrees, which is like 400 Fahrenheit, we should vaporize there, or even a bit lower. Some say that, you know, much higher temperature is fine. Some even say like you can vaporize at 1,000 degrees, doesn't matter because the crystal water will protect it from degradation. So we have many conflicting ideas and practices. Some vaporizers are even non-controlled. You have no idea what temperature you use. You just see the smoke is coming out, and that should be fine. So to stop that, I started this investigation. And when I started doing these tests, so what you have to understand is that most of these vaporizers are not really designed so that we have a very accurate temperature control. Just an example, the Prop 110 version, which is, I'm not speaking against it, just a fact. I also used it and it was working fine, so I'm not speaking against anything here. I just try to describe that when you switch it on, it goes up to, instead of 230, which is the set temperature, it goes up to 261 degrees. So it kind of switches off at 230, but it has the inertia because it has this copper sleeve or clamp heater, and that has a lot of mass, and the sensor is on the bottom. So by the time the bottom heats up, the side is much hotter, and then it will overshoot. And then when it is cooling down and switching on at 228, it still cools down to 226, and then will warm back. Even if it's just warming up 4 degrees, it will go up another 20 degrees. So this is the temperature fluctuation of the device without adding any oxalic acid. So depending on if you put in the oxalic acid when it is cooling down or warming up, you will get completely different results. And so I had to think over how to design it better. And the way I achieved that is that I understood that the heat is taken away mainly from the bottom of this heated bowl. So I have to put back the heat there. We have to use real heat control, not just on-off. And I understand why they didn't use it, because it would start switching on-off like 50 degrees before, so it is not overshooting, and that would make it very slow. So it was just practicality that they didn't use that. Also, they used the internal relay of the heat controller, and that fails if you switch it on-off so many times. So it's good to have a solid-state relay or a MOSFET switching on-off the heating, so it's not a moving component. And then the low-positioned outlet tube or spout, whatever we call it, is important so that you can reach the entrance of the hive, and that should be strong enough to support the weight of the tool and possibly the batteries once it's a cordless device. And this is how Instant Vap was born, that I was looking at all of these problems. And the other thing is like the dispenser. I didn't like this cone-shaped one, which goes into the Teflon tube, because as you push it into the oxalic acid, also the oxalic acid goes on the outside and then starts to leak once you push it into the device, and then it messes up your device. So I kind of rearranged that. And when I finished the design of the first Instant Vap Original, this is what you get. You heat up, this is actual measurement, it stabilizes, and when you vaporize, it goes down, goes back, goes down, goes back. You know, I just finished, I don't know, 20 colonies at home, vaporizing them, and I was logging the temperature every second with a data logger, temperature data logger. So with this, you can do measurement because you know that you will always measure the same, at least you don't measure the noise of temperature control. So back in 2022, I started experimenting at home. First, I had to figure out how to capture the oxalic acid from the vaporizer. And I tried to vaporize into water. That was not working because it was just boiling up. And then I ended up vaporizing into a copper tube, 13 millimeter diameter. I put it into water, so I had 45 degrees on the two ends of this plastic tube, and I put in water to cool it down, and I was vaporizing in here. Nothing came out on the other side because, as you can see here on the left-hand side, everything crystallizes back very fast in the first, I don't know, 20 inches, and then you can plug one end, you can put in the distilled water, and you can rinse it, and then measure the acid content. I was measuring the temperature with the data logger, and I was also measuring the weight of the dispenser, and I was creating this 100 milliliter, stock solutions for measurement's sake. And here are the temperature drops, the every second measurements. when I was 200 degrees up to 300 degrees every 10 degrees. And what is fascinating about it is that just today I started to see something here, and we will come back to this slide a bit later when it will make sense. But I can already say that you can see that the temperature drops very fast at 200 degrees, and then it drops slower and slower as we go up. And then you get a gradual temperature drop, a much longer, like 2-3 times longer it takes to cool down compared to the 200 degrees. And I understood why is that and why is it crucial to understand. It's a shame I don't have like the higher temperatures data logged, but what is going on is that when you have the oxalic acid dropping in, it starts to boil. And I'm sure that all of you have seen it, that when you have a very hot surface and a droplet of cold water drops on it, it starts to hover around. And that's called Leidenfrost effect. It's called by a guy, I think from Germany, from 1700s. There's a very thin layer of gas forming under the droplet, and that lifts it up and hovers it around. And that's what happens when you are increasing the temperature of the vaporizer. You are actually introducing this layer of gas, and that is an insulation. So the oxalic acid is not cooling down that fast your mattress or whatever you are heating to vaporize from. So in this case, the aluminum pot is actually not being able to cool down very fast because it is hovering around, and we will talk about it a bit later. So we did acid-based titration. I will not read whatever is here. Anybody can look it up on Google, and it's a way of measuring the acidity of a substance, and you can very accurately measure even the acidity on a bee. When you vaporize, after you vaporize, you can measure how much acid is actually on a bee. And Randy Oliver was doing that a lot in the last couple of years, trying to figure out what is the best thing to use for extended release method. What so should it be like paper or wood or whatever. So he was getting very interesting results when he experimented with that. Anyway, so what we did in 2022, I collected these 10 samples, and I visited my chemist friends, a couple, and actually this lady who is doing the titration here, I learned beekeeping from his father, who died when I was very young. So I knew the family, and I knew that they were chemists, and they were kind enough to start helping me with these measurements. But and we only was able to measure the acid content and nothing about whether there's any formic acid or not. So based on all this, what we learned, TGA measurements, I want people to think, what do we expect from these experiments? I was also expecting something, and what is wonderful about experimenting is that you will be always shocked, and you get results which you are not expecting, and then you try to first figure out what did you do wrong? And then you try to explain it, maybe not the best way the first time, but it's just so fun to get unexpected results and then trying to figure out why is it, and then go on and learning from that. So this was the result back in 2022. I have to emphasize that this is only the total acidity expressed as if all was oxalic acid and no formic acid. But this is already telling us a lot of things. It tells us that it looks like it's not very good at low temperatures. So what we expected is that, and I have to tell you honestly that I was also expecting that we will get a very good result, let's say at 200 degrees, and we will get a very bad result at 240, 250. And then I can tell to customers that buy my device because mine is not clogging even at 200 degrees. And this is really a good selling point. I'm not decomposing oxalic acid, and this is the only device which has this feature that you can stably work at 200 degrees and not clog the device. And when I saw this result, I decided that I will not be silent about it, but I have to pursue it and learn what is going on and then share with beekeepers, because that's much more important than gaining some brownie points with selling some more devices. So I already talked about this shortly at, I think it's Frederick Dunn's YouTube channel a couple of years ago. But I was very hesitant to talk about it more because I knew that maybe I introduce a lot of formic acid at some degrees, and then people will just rise their vaporizer endlessly and do a fast job, but not an efficient one. So I didn't want to be a source of half information which can damage beekeepers or their bees. So what I wanted is repeated measurements by somebody like a third party, and it was too much at stake. It's too much. It's very different from what we expected or what I was expecting. And as formic acid is one of the decomposition routes of oxalic acid, we don't know if we are measuring oxalic acid or formic acid or a ratio of the two acids. So half result is no result. I was keeping silent about it, but it kind of bugged me all the time. And I tried to get help from universities. Some of them did some tests, actually only one university, but they couldn't figure out how to separate oxalic acid from formic acid. They tried very complicated methods. I don't know why, but I kind of trusted in them. I'm not a chemical engineer, so we didn't succeed with that. Also had to wait for months, sometimes for 6 months for a new test, and it was just annoying me. And finally, at the end of 2024, somebody sent my research to Randy Oliver, and he got on the hook. So he loved it. He said it's very interesting, and because first he was saying we vaporize too high temperature, 230, but after I showed all my evidence, he said it's worth pursuing this study. And he started repeating my tests, and he got very similar results, like within 10% same direction results. And I really wanted him to do this, to do that. I was very excited about it, but he didn't want to go higher than 250 degrees, and he only was interested in 4-gram titrations, and I was interested in 1, 2, 3, 4. And he tried to measure formic acid content with an interesting way, but he couldn't show it at these temperatures. And then he will publish his findings very soon, so he's working on that. So I was very excited that we got very similar results, but I saw that I will not be able to kind of like, I need to do my own measurements, and I can't rely on others because then it just doesn't work. So I decided I rented a place, bought all the equipment. I have a colleague who is very good in chemistry. That was his hobby. So we started experimenting and working out the measurements and proving the concept. So as you can see, I started, we did a lot of experiments about glass tube, stainless steel tube, aluminum tube, copper tube, and we ended up using glass because it was working fine. And then there's no danger that, let's say, it starts to oxidize with copper tube, and then you may get some funny results. As well as you can see transparently that, did you rinse it well? Do you have the oxalic acid removed? So it ended up being a good choice. And then I ended up using a power supply so that I always have regulated voltage and not like once a charge battery, once a discharge. And I was vaporizing into these glass tubes and then rinsing it out, creating a 100 milliliter stock solution. And from that, did the titration. And here is the setup in that room. And it took probably, I could look it up, but it took probably more than a month to make this measurement. 1 gram, 2 grams, 3 grams, 4 grams, and to track the efficacy from 180 degrees up to 530 degrees Celsius. So you can see as it goes up, and then this is where we stopped last time at 300 degrees, and then you can see the downside as I was extending the measurement longer and longer. And okay, here I still just measured the full acidity of the sample, but didn't know if there was any formic acid introduced. But we already learned from this that it's not true that you can vaporize 1,000 degrees because you will not get any results. it's not true that it's okay not to control the temperature, because you can see that either if it's too cold, you will get very little output, or if it's too hot, you will get very decreased output. And just here I added in grams, so it's more like separated from each other. And you can see that, if you vaporize at 200 degrees, you get 0.7 grams when you vaporize 2 grams in the Instant Vaporizer. But if you vaporize at, let's say, 260, then you get 1.4 grams, supposing that it's only oxalic acid. So I didn't know that, but you can still see that you can get even 0.1 gram if it's 530 degrees instead of 1.4 or 1.5. So anyway, this was already very revealing. And so what I did a lot of experiments whether we can separate oxalic acid from formic acid. And what we did, we created a stock solution, just mixing up oxalic acid and formic acid, and then taking out a sample from that and titrating from 100 milliliter, 10 milliliter right away titration. So you get a mixture of oxalic acid and formic acid, and then evaporating very slowly at 60, 70 degrees the distilled water as well as any formic acid which is possibly there, and then dissolving that in distilled water and then titrating that again. And the difference between the two, here I should measure only the oxalic acid, and when I measured before, I measured the oxalic acid and the formic acid, and the difference is the formic acid. And it was working within a percentage. So I got back the original oxalic acid content within a percentage. So that was really exciting when we saw. First we had some errors, I was disappointed, but the second measurement, it was good. We repeated a couple of times, it was reliable. So then we had to continue doing, I zoomed on this critical part, and I started doing the measurements. So you can see I measured, let's say, 2 grams of those from 220 to 320 degrees. And there you can see that the formic acid started to appear. At 220, only 2%, oxalic acid content 63. And as I was going up, there was a big jump at 290, and I didn't measure 280 for some reason. I could repeat that, but anyway, you still get the idea that now we can actually see what here you still have more than 60% efficacy if you think that it's only oxalic acid, but in reality it's only 39% oxalic acid and 23% formic acid. And I looked at the presentation of Randy Oliver, and he says that 25 grams of 65% formic acid in one day is the ideal kind of formic acid release when you want to treat with formic acid for 4 days, and then you get a good result. So here 1% is half a minute. So it means that if you are treating with formic acid, you would treat with a constant of, here you get 1 minute of treatment, here you get 1.5 minutes, but here you already get like 11.5 minutes of released formic acid into the colony in 20 seconds. So that may already cause some problem with the uncapped route or with the queen if it's close by. And then I repeated the same measurement with 4 grams, just for you guys in US who are pushing more and more grams. And you can see that because the oxalic acid, the bigger quantity of oxalic acid cools down the device more, it shifts right. So you get good results still at a higher range. At, let's say, at 290, you get 5%, and it starts to pick up at 300 degrees, 10% formic acid. And then it starts to increase more and more. And you get slightly higher efficacy. I go back to the previous one. No, I think I just go on, and we may come back later. What was very interesting is that I was also measuring the temperature drop of the vaporizer, actually just recording it when it was vaporizing into this glass tube at each cycle. And it was not the same. You would expect that it's always the same because the same sample needs to be vaporized. Like 2 grams, why is it sometimes 16 degrees temperature drop from the set temperature to the minimum temperature, which I record before it starts to rise back. sometimes, as you go up 28 degrees and then it goes down to 9 degrees. So the huge difference, like, almost 3 times the temperature drop. And this was kind of showing that where you get the best efficacy, there you have the biggest temperature drop. So that was a very interesting result. And I still have it here. I don't know why. And what I understood today as I was thinking is that I think it is because of the Leidenfrost effect. The sample is not able to cool down as you are going up and up and up with the temperature, cool down the cooking pot because it is hovering around and not passing on it's not able to draw away the heat from the aluminum. And that's why you can see that the 4 gram is later, but with the 1 gram, the earliest it starts to go down with the temperature. So anyway, that was kind of opening my eyes that you can do a vaporizer, which is, you can vaporize like more than 100 times 2 grams with 8 amp hour battery, but with a very reduced result. And that's not a good direction. And some manufacturers started to push it that they can vaporize more and more with the same dosage with the same amp hour battery. And it just didn't make sense to me. And now I understood why it can be and why it's not a hoax. It can be, but with a very low efficacy device. Okay. The other thing which I also recognize is that I was designing my dispenser, oxalic acid dispenser or plunger, and I measured the weight of the oxalic acid at the mark of 1 gram, 2 grams, 3 grams, 4 grams when it was cold. But when the dispenser is hot, when you pull it out from the device, and I recommend people that it's hot because then it will be always clean when you pull it out because everything dissolves from it. If it's always cold, more oxalic acid goes back to it. But anyway, when I was measuring it, I vaporized, let's say, with a turbo with an 8 amp hour battery 62 times. And when I actually measured the before and after weight of the box I dispensed from, it ended up being 73.5 times 2 grams. So it was picking up 18% more oxalic acid than the scale showed. Because as it is hot, it is shrinking the oxalic acid, and also some oxalic acid goes on the outside tube. So how can we interpret these results? I was trying to, so first of all, it's not the question whether your oxalic acid, people used to say, your oxalic acid will degrade at that temperature. It's always decomposing at a degree in every vaporizer. You cannot vaporize without decomposing some oxalic acid. The big question is what percentage of the initial quantity remains, and if that's and also how much formic acid you introduce. So we have to see that all vaporizer, there is no vaporizer which doesn't decompose. I never measured more than like 75% efficacy device. When I was like changing a lot on my device, I could achieve that, but like I introduced copper and so on, it became very expensive. It didn't make sense. I just wanted to see the big picture. So when you vaporize at 200 degrees, 2 grams, it takes 60, 70 seconds to finish. But when you do that at 230, it's already 25, 30 seconds. At 260, only 10 seconds. At 300 degrees, 7, 8 seconds. So what we can see is there is a very fast reduction of time it takes to vaporize. And the other thing is, so it's already degrading at 200 degrees, but it stays there for a long time, so more degrades than when you vaporize at 230, where although it's a bit hotter, but it goes out much faster. And you cannot calculate it, you have to actually test it to get the picture. But it kind of makes you understand of why is that. You have these two conflicting curves of hotter and hotter environment, but faster and faster. And there is an optimum temperature where you get the least oxalic acid decomposing. Also, what influences the rate of decomposition? And I just listed a couple of them here. The set temperature of the vaporizer, the size of the surface area in contact with the oxalic acid is also very important. The bigger the surface, the more heat shock it gets. And the amount of evaporated or vaporized oxalic acid, if you do 1 grams, it cools down much less than if you do 4 grams, which will cool down you will vaporize at a lower temperature. And the degree of thermal inertia, do you have a thick bottom of the cooking pot or just a thin wall, copper or whatever, and then that will cool down instantly very much. And the location and the design and the dynamics of the heating, how strong is your heating, how many watts you are putting back. And then also, as I was explaining, the lead and frost effect is a big issue. That what actually happens, I think, with lead and frost is that you are not too much, you are steaming the oxalic acid. There is a bigger pressure in the cooking pot, and the very hot steam is decomposing the oxalic acid as it goes out. It's not just boiling on the bottom and you have relatively cold air, but you start to generate a lot of steam from this the very big temperature difference of the two the surface of the cooking pot and the boiling oxalic acid, and that even as it is going out through the tubes, decomposing a lot of oxalic acid. So the conclusion is that every oxalic acid vaporizer has a different optimum temperature settings, and at that optimum temperature setting there will be an efficiency, 50%, 60, 70, 80 or 25, and that can be only measured. You cannot create a logic behind. You actually have to measure it to get an idea. You can get an idea just by looking at it, the smoke, how much smoke comes out after you have already calibrated your eyes. But before that, it was very easy to fool me with, because it can be a very long, gentle smoke giving only 25%, or it can be a faster vaporization, and that can be more than 70%. And it's very easy. You cannot kind of just guess it by looking at it. Of course, I can see some devices where you get a very gentle smoke, almost, you can see it just doesn't work. That's not right. Anyway, and I measured also a couple of devices and setups, and you can get, if you are not controlling the temperature and it warms up to close to 500 degrees, you can get like 5% efficacy of the initial quantity, and you can reach like 70+% efficacies if you have a good design. And I got some data from beekeepers, and a couple of weeks ago, actually maybe 2 weeks ago, less than that, I got this result. A person was measuring, had bees in 2-3 locations, and he was sampling them, 5, 6, and 5 colonies. And he was vaporizing them 2 grams with a certain vaporizer, doesn't matter what it was. I measured the efficacy of that device. That was roughly 25 to 35%. So that was like decomposing a lot more than it should have been. And you can see that you still got like from the 16 colonies, like 304 Mite dropping the first 24 hours after the first treatment. And you get like sometimes 640 mites, 500. And then the guy, and what is interesting is that day 13 should be the turning point where you should see much lower mite drops. But in this case, you started to see the highest one, 1000 mites, on day 13. So all the brood which was kept, they were touching some oxalic acid. They got a vape, and still you get an increase. So that shows you that it's not okay to be happy that there is a mite drop. There will be mite drop when you vaporize, even with the worst device. But the question is how much remained up there which went under the cappings. That's what I try to say. So on the 7th treatment, he got the Instant Vaporizer Turbo for me, and right away, after the first 24 hours, he had 2,587 mites dropping after 24 hours vaporizing first, which is like 244% compared to the previous treatment. And they vaporized 2 grams in each time. That shows you that you really need to look at efficacy when you want to get a good result. And if you just increase the quantity of oxalic acid, you cool down even more the device, you get even lower efficacy. That's not a solution just to increase endlessly your oxalic acid input. And then he vaporized again. In 2 days later, he still got 1,600 mites. And then he's continuing the treatments. I don't have that data, but it's kind of showed me that it's right to talk about it because it's about a surviving colony or a dead colony. That's the difference between the two. If you are not counting the mites, you are just treating, doing 7 times, 6 times treatments every 3 days. You may end up with more mites after the treatment if you had like 50% of the mites going under the cappings again and again. And what I really want people to do is that when there is a complete broodless period, either by caging or winter time, vaporize certain amount of colonies with 2 grams, certain amount with, like 10 colonies with 3 grams, 10 colonies with 4 grams, and then repeat that in 3 days, repeat that in 3 days, and see how the mite, what is the curve of how do the mites disappear. Do you need 2 treatments, 3 treatments, 4 treatments? And then that can help a lot for us to understand what is the right dosage to achieve enough efficacy so that you can do a round of treatment even when there is brood and only a small margin of mites going back under the cappings. Okay, and I have some friends who will do those measurements, but the more measurements we have, the better results we get, the more idea we have. And I was just wanted to show this from one of the talk of Randy Oliver, that he was treating with formic acid 25 grams per day for 4 days, and you can see that the mites started to, you had a lot of mite drops first couple of days. After that, around, I don't know, average 75 mites dropping, and on day 13, day 14, it started to drop and then disappeared altogether because it was an efficacious treatment. It went under the cappings, killed all the mites, even if he was not treating at this time, but it already killed the mites under the cappings, and it was just waiting for the bees to emerge and then clean out the dead mites. Anyway, it kind of opened my eyes that if you have a good efficacious treatment with oxalic acid, you should get the same result. After the cycle, you should get a very low mite count. And if you don't get, that's somewhere is faulty. Not like here, you could see that we got increasing and increasing quantity of mites even after finishing 6 treatments. And just a couple of words about the new turbo. Why did I develop it? I already had a device, the original device, which has a screen, which has a voltage meter and everything. Well, every manufacturer, if he's honest to himself, he sees the weaknesses of devices, and this also kind of, I can see the statistics of how many devices come back for repair, and this is leading the statistics, partly because if any person gets water on the ceramic insulation here, then that creates a steam, goes back on the circuit board, condenses there, and creates short circuit and fails. When they clean it, a lot of time they are not careful. They may even just clean it in autumn, the last time they treat. Next time they open it up, next autumn, it will not warm up, just struggle around the boiling point because it is just warming up the insulation as well. And that causes a lot of failure. And also the manufacturability of this device is like, it's a lot of sheet metal, it tips forward, the handle is a bit, the back part is not connected. So I decided not to try to fix this, but come up with a much better design. And the compact was a better design, and that has much less failures, and commercial beekeepers really love it. But then when I did all this study, I understood what is the optimum temperature, and I wanted to make a device which works fine at that temperature, and you don't need to wait a lot before you go to the next colony. If you raise the temperature, it becomes faster, the vaporization, but the heating doesn't become faster. So you're sitting there after you finish the vaporization for 10 seconds, and that is annoying. So I had to raise up the wattage of heating as well as redesigning a couple of things. So I fitted the hardware to the, so to say, the software, what is the optimum temperature. And now we understand why I set up 260 degrees. It's still adjustable from 230 to 260, by the way, if someone wants to reduce it. I don't allow below 230 because, and you can change that to Fahrenheit very easily, because then you decompose too much. I have to avoid, I have to stop people making bad choices, even if they don't watch this video, they don't have the information. If they can't lower it, they come back with a question, and then I can explain it to them. And if we go back to here, the results, you can see that at 260 degrees, you get 73% efficacy, but the speed compared to 230 is double the speed. So you get very good efficacy. The formic acid content is still small enough that it will not cause any issues. You already have formic acid at 230, 240. It's like 2 minutes of formic acid release when you treat with formic acid, you know, so that's not a big deal. But then if you go to 4 grams, people will ask, you know, why don't I go to 290 degrees, because you get a bit better efficacy. And the reason for that is that if the person is not changing the dispenser to, you know, he happens to dose a bit less than 4 grams, only 2 grams, because he's not pushing in right, he's getting a very low efficacy at 290, only 39%, and he's introducing a lot of formic acid, which may cause problem. So I have to make a vaporizer which is safe to use even if you don't read the instructions and you make bad choices. So that's why I decided that I stop at 260, and that's where you can safely vaporize and you can never cause any issues with formic acid or with getting a very low efficacy if you go lower dosage. Yeah, I don't know if you came and you wanted to ask something. Anyway, so you wanted to ask, or let's go on.
Well, you can go ahead and keep going on. I have a list of questions. There's some in the comments as well, but you finish up your presentation, then we'll go from there.
Okay. So it's ideal here that the electronic is separated from the heated part. It's well hidden, well sealed. So even if anything goes wrong on the front end, like you introduce some water, it will not go on the electronic. And it shows the temperature, it shows the voltage, and it's also, there's a counter inside. The way it works is that when you plug in the battery, it right away displays how many is the total cycle of vaporization you did in the lifetime of the device, which is good for you to look at, and also very good for me when I service a device to look, oh, this has 25,000 vaporization or just 500, and I can learn a lot from that, you know, how well the quality is working. As well as when you vaporize, you finish, it says low bat, or you finish vaporizing, you can press the off button and then press the lower arrow, and then it will display the cycle of vaporization you did with the actual battery on. So before you remove, you can actually look at you vaporized 55 times with this battery, and that can be like, you can write it on the battery, and you can know, it's a dead battery almost. Don't worry, next time I put it aside and I use the good batteries. And also it can be good that when you hand over the device to an employee, he goes out to vaporize your 1,000 colonies or 10,000 colonies. When you get back the device, you will be able to check it, and don't tell the guy that you can actually check it, that did he vaporize or he was drinking beer. So that way you can make sure that the job was done. And this is vaporizing in 10 seconds the 2 grams at 73% efficacy. You can see here the cycle time. So it takes 7 seconds to vaporize 1 gram and another 3 seconds to reach the set temperature. 10 seconds for the 2 grams and another 4 seconds, which is just about enough, or even not enough, to pull out the device. It starts blinking slow when it finishes vaporizing. So you know that you are ready to go to the next colony. You don't need to wait. That makes it fast, the treatment. And then once the LED on the back becomes solid, red, then you know that it's ready to vaporize the next colony. And that's when it can count the next cycle. If you vaporize earlier than that, then that will not count as a new vaporization. And then 3 grams, 13 seconds, and 5 seconds warm-up time, and 14 seconds for the 4 grams. And that was measured at around 25 degrees ambient. So that may be different when it's 10 degrees and windy and things like that, or a discharge battery or a lower amp hour battery. I was measuring with an 8 amp hour battery, but it still gives you an indication of the cycle time itself, and that cuts half the time of the compact. Also, it's good that anything fails in the device, like the sensor or the heater or anything like that, it will display that error message. So we don't need to think too much. We know what is going on, and then we can service it. And that takes up a lot of my time to try to figure out what is going on at the customer end. A lot of times it's like a small issue, and it's good that they are not sending it back, but we can figure it out, and I can give them some advice. maybe it's just, you know, using a bad battery, and this one will show you that it's actually very low voltage and not able to keep the voltage, and that's why the device is slow. Buy a new battery or things like that. Okay. I did a small table just comparing the compact, the light, the turbo, light, compact, and the original, so that people can look it back. What is interesting about the turbo, because it picks up a bit more oxalic acid as well as it's more efficient, so it cools down more the oxalic acid, the cooking chamber. It gives like around 15% more oxalic acid output at the same dosage, but also it uses slightly more amp power to do that. But when you actually do the calculation of how much actually a battery costs per colony, then you will be surprised that usually it's less than $2. And to use that battery for a couple of years, really not a big investment. It looks big when you do the investment, but if you buy any other treatment like, you know, Apilife VAR or whatever you have locally, that ends up being more expensive than doing one treatment and buying those batteries. But anyway, people just have to kind of get a feeling and calculate it for themselves, and then it just makes sense. So it's 400 watts, the light is 145 watts, the compact and the original is 250 watts. And then maybe a good thing to point out with the light device, because it's smaller cooking pot, better this, I mean, it is designed for hobbyist beekeepers. It takes only 0.5 amps to heat up, and then you can even use very small capacity battery to heat up. It will work fine because you are not stressing that battery with 16 amps, only half as much. Yeah, so the rest you can see the weight and everything, I think, and you can see the amount of time it takes to vaporize. And I want to acknowledge a couple of persons who made it possible for this research to be done. I want to thank Imre Kovács and Klára Hanko for doing the titrations. Sadly, Imre Kovács already died since then. And he was already having cancer at that time, didn't tell me, but invested time into all this research. And that's just, it was mind-blowing to me when I learned that he was dying, and I just managed to visit him the last time. And then Dr. Barna Kovács for doing the TGA measurements. And I really want to thank Randy Oliver for doing all those proof measurements. And he did a lot more than I did. And we have always some little disagreements because we are both, you know, strong-headed and so on. But I was glad that I could do the measurements. He could do the measurements. And there are little differences, but still we get this very similar results. And he did measure like what is the gas it gives, you know, what is the decomposition at lower temperature, at higher temperature. He looked at, you know, is it carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide? He will share all those data in time with you. I don't want to. He also measured like when you introduce oxalic acid with a screen bottom of, you know, hive, how much oxalic acid you are actually losing. And a lot of valuable information which we can use later on, and I'm really looking forward to his published articles on this issue. And also Laszlo Kovács, one of my colleagues, you know, he really carried a lot of this weight. He did a lot of measurements for me, and he's a super help in this, and I'm really thankful for that. But I really want to thank all of you guys who bought my tool and uses it and give feedback about it, so I can learn from that. And when you buy a device, you are actually investing in the future, because I develop even the existing devices. I mean, this device is not the same which Kamon got the first month when he tested the device. The handle is thicker. There's a lot of small improvements in this device. The circuit board is different. There is battery protection, not only the screen, but inside. So I constantly develop as I go ahead, because that's how a good company is working. As you could see, I did some research, and it's really important to me that what you get is actually truly helping you and not just getting some money from you. And as I see necessary, I introduce new products, and I introduced actually 4 devices in the last less than 4 years. And it's really important to me that I service what I sell. So I really want to service them as long as possible, as long as necessary. So that when you buy a device, you know that that will be serviced, that will be repaired, and any device will fail over time. You know, if you're a hobbyist beekeeper, you have 10 colonies, you may use that for 20 years, you know, and it's just not used up because you use so much, so little. But if you're a commercial beekeeper, you have thousands of colonies, you will fail your device much faster. My job is to repair it and learn from those failures and to get it better and better. And when you buy a copycat device, you are not getting all this. Actually, you kill the development and all this, and I hope you understand that. And one of my main focus in the future, it will be not too much about oxalic acid vaporizers, because I think I kind of learned enough to get a good picture, and I don't really see a lot of gaps now. I'm sure that I will still see some new things, but what we have to get prepared is tropilelapse. And I really press it that over time it will come. I believe that very strongly. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 5 years, I hope not, but that will come over eventually. You know, it advanced to Europe 600 kilometers in 1 year. I mean, it can be one accident, one irresponsible person, it will be here. And oxalic acid is not that good for the tropilelapse because it stays outside only 2 days and it multiplies much faster, and you have to vaporize like every 5 days to not to increase your mite load. And you can imagine vaporizing all summer, all spring, all autumn, every 5 days just to survive. That's not really a feasible solution. So I'm trying to figure out better ways of combating the two types of mites, tropilelapse and varroa mites. And I'm ready for questions. I'm surprised how fast we went.
Well, Janos, thank you so much for giving us that time. I've put together many presentations myself, and it takes a lot of time to organize one and put it together, and we appreciate that very much. I have several questions in the comments. I also have some for myself, and one of the main things that I wanted to get to is, let's see, right here. So there's a question that I saw earlier. How should we close up the hive entrance when we're using oxalic acid? And if so, how long should we keep it closed until the oxalic acid is now not in a vapor form?
Yes. It depends on, first of all, how big is your entrance. In US, you sometimes have the full width of the colony. You have, I mean, you don't get that in Hungary. We get much smaller entrances. And if you have such a big entrance, I think you should have a reduced entrance when you vaporize. Otherwise, you just lose too much. They push it out. You can vaporize also from the top if you can solve that, and that is a bit more helpful because the oxalic acid has to go through the frames before it can go out. So that will be cooled down and then much less will go out. If you have a screen bottom floor and you can't close that, definitely you have to solve it to vaporize from the top, from the escape area, and most units, the better, it's not going through any metal mesh, because it cools down and most of the oxalic acid will end up being on that mesh and not on the bees. So it's better that you are actually, there's a gap there, and then it can go around and then go between the frames and go down. So in Hungary, we usually have like, 5 inches or like 10 centimeters wide entrances, and even that is reduced in winter time. And there it's completely okay to vaporize through the entrance. But I also understand that commercial beekeepers most of them will not play around closing it and opening it. It's just too much time. So they will get slightly lower efficacy. What is good about the turbo is that it has such a fast evaporation, vaporization, that it really, the bees don't have time to react. In 10 seconds, 20 seconds, it goes in whatever quantity you use, and it has a speed. So it's actually pushing it in and not just gently, smoking, and the bees are just pushing it out. So that when people started using the turbo, they recognized that even through the entrance, even if they had a couple of boxes, it was coming out from the top everywhere, and they were so shocked, what is going on. And Yeah, that's helpful. You know, you can have a very efficacious device, like let's say uh, 60, 70% device. But if it releases the oxalic acid very slowly, I'm afraid that that will not be mixed in the colony. That will be more localized, close to the entrance where you are vaporizing or whatever place you vaporize, and
Hmm.
you will not get a good distribution of oxalic acid in the colony.
That makes sense. Because if it's moving slowly, it seems to go from a vapor to back to a, crystal form very quickly. And so
Yes.
what you're saying basically is these faster models are able to push it through the colony very quickly, and it's something I hadn't really thought about. Something that I do because I do use a full entrance on our pallets. They're only 3/8 of an inch tall, so it's not
Yes.
a very tall entrance, but it is the entire width of the box almost. And so we take a wet cloth. We get some cheap cloths. We get them wet, not to where they're dripping water, but they're damp, and then we just will put the vaporizer in one corner, put the cloth up against it on the left, and then whenever we pull the vaporizer out, we just scoot the cloth the rest of the way over. And
A maximum 5 minutes, I would say, keep it closed, not more than that if you happen to close it. But when I vaporize into a glass tube, it's right away contents, it's right away. You know, like it's not like after 2 minutes. And that's not fully the case in a colony because you have a big surface and it hovers around before it settles down somewhere.
mhm,
And it also depends on the humidity level. If it's a very dry season, you get less efficacy. If it's more humid, it faster crystallizes on all the surfaces, and then you get actually more mite drop. Uh, and one other thing which about where to vaporize, if you vaporize from the back, some people are trying to do that they vaporize on the frame itself, and the idea is that I'm not shooting the queen and the bees, and it will distribute itself and it's all good. But when you actually open the colony, you will see that there is a bump of oxalic acid on that food surface. So
yes.
most of the oxalic acid will crystallize on that surface because once you have some oxalic acid on that surface, oxalic acid loves crystallizing more and more on that surface. So I had beekeepers who killed a lot of their colonies having this mindset, and then they understood it, they changed their way of treatment, and they get a very good results.
Mm.
So it's just small things you can make bad choices, and then you kill your colonies.
Yeah, let's not do that. When I used to treat from behind the hives, we drill a hole. This was back when I was using the. This is before you ever created a vaporizer, and the good old copper barrels that were always breaking off or bending on me, and so we'd stick them in the back, and occasionally we try to get it in between the frames, but sometimes you'd make a mistake, and because I have different boxes and some of them are a little bit different spacing, which is a whole nother conversation. But yes, you pull that frame out and it has just tons of oxalic acid on the end bar of the frame, and it's a significant amount. And so obviously that's not getting dispersed through the colony. And then the occasion that you accidentally stick a long barrel all the way up against a frame, and the pressure builds up and blows the top off the vaporizer, and that is not a
That's
good
why a
position.
full face mask is important, gloves, because then you can get a lot of mess on you.
Yes. Yeah,
And
100%.
also, if you vaporize through a hole, you can have wax there, propolis there, that can clog up the outlet tube and can cause issues. Or if you vaporize through a hole after rain, the wood can suck up a lot of water, moisture, and then it cools down much more the outlet tube, and that can cause clogging as well. Usually that's in late autumn when it's not any more sunshine yet.
Yeah, I've never, I've used all of your models, but I've never had one clog or have any issues. But ever since I got the Instant Vap, I just go straight through the entrance. I never actually put it through wood or anything like that.
Yes.
It's just, I don't like drilling a hole in my boxes personally. That's just the way I do it.
I
And
agree.
typically um, I'll leave those cloths on for just as long as I get around the pallet usually, because it seems to me that you can visibly see most of the oxalic acid when they're still blowing it out if they're going to do any, and it seems like within a couple of minutes that's just not happening anymore. And so Another question that we had was, what are your thoughts on the propane models of vaporizers out there? What efficacy are you seeing with propane type fast vaporizers?
I didn't measure any of them. I have a little bit of experience. Once I was bringing a vaporizer to an older man, he was a doctor, and he showed me that he has a gas vaporizer, and that had something like this long outlet tube. And I said, how is it not clogging? I mean, I can't get it longer than that, and it clogs.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I really, really have to warm it up in the beginning, and after it is not clogging. So what he was actually doing is he was decomposing so much the oxalic acid that it was not enough quantity to create a blockage. Because when oxalic acid crystals touch a colder surface than 157 degrees, where it starts to sublimate or vaporize, it actually touches any surface, it will recrystallize, and that's how you get a clogging. And if you don't get a clogging in a long tube, that's because you don't have only some residues of oxalic acid. And the rest is either formic acid or just water, steam, and so on. And what I can say, I mean, you can reply that, I mean, you can give the answer to that question just looking at this study. If you're not controlling the temperature, you have no idea what you're doing. You may have a very good efficacy or almost nothing. The other thing is that usually these gas vaporizers, you put in a bigger quantity of oxalic acid, you close it, and you go from colony to colony, and you just blow it in with a, like a, you know, blower, like battery powered ones. Mm-hmm. And what happens with that, or a heat gun or whatever, is that nobody has proved it yet that when you warm up oxalic acid and it starts to boil, or you put it into a hot environment, then it will be an even distribution of oxalic acid, crystal water exiting it. Or in the beginning, you have much bigger dosage of crystal water, and then as it gets thicker and thicker, you get more and more oxalic acid. Mm-hmm. And just to assume that you get a big quantity in, and you just go from colony to colony, and you get a good result, is just an assumption. That has to be proved. And you could measure the oxalic acid level on the bees and so on, but even if you do all these measurements, if you can't see the temperature, you may measure it once and it's a good result. Next time, it's not good at all.
There's no way to be consistent with that measure.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many variables: temperature, humidity, mite load, everything. We have to control what we can, I think. Mm-hmm. It's really important that as much as we can, we control, so we are not left at luck.
That makes sense. Bob Benny was using the propane model a year or so ago, and he was having terrible clogging with it. And so the recommendation was to crank the temperature up extremely high. But at that point, we really didn't have any understanding of what kind of degradation was happening to the oxalic acid at that point. And like you said, maybe on the first hive, it's in the right sweet spot where you're getting a good dose of oxalic acid, but then the propane continues to heat it up. And now we're going past that. And we're only getting 20% that we could be, or this, there's just no way to know. And so Bob is now using your Instant Vap models and actually carries them at his Blue Ridge store in Georgia because he really likes how dialed they are in, and also they're just really a nice product for his employees too. There's a lot of employee safety and things like that to consider as well. So we got some other questions, Chris. Do you mind? I know you've got kind of a list going. Do you mind throwing some of those up there?
Sure, no problem. Just wanted to respond to you here. Did you want to? I don't know how much you addressed this one. Did you want to go over this one again?
Yeah. So this was the first question, Janos, and I think you touched over this, but if you don't mind talking about that again.
I just try to figure out what is 375. That should be below 200 degrees Celsius, I believe, because 200 degrees Celsius is just 400 Fahrenheit. So it's around 380 degrees. So what is the phase change? I think what is going on at lower temperature is very simple. You get a very slow vaporization. Actually, I tested it. What I did, and it's up on my YouTube channel, You remove the lid of this vaporizer and you can do this test. Well, you can't because I limit it to 200 degrees on these units. You cannot go lower. But what I did, I set it to 160 degrees and I just vaporized 2 grams. And what happened is that it slowly boiled, crystal water gone, you get the crystals staying there in the bowl, at least a big portion of it, the original portion. And then even after 5 minutes, the crystals are there. Because once the crystal water is gone, the water of crystallization, 30% of the oxalic acid dehydrate, there's no good heat transfer between the crystals and the oxalic acid. I mean the aluminum surface. So what happens is that it's just a very slow sublimation, and even after a couple of minutes, the oxalic acid is there. And that's going on even up to 200 degrees, which is 400 Fahrenheit. If you set the temperature 200 or higher, then you already melt the oxalic acid as well. There's a melting point of oxalic acid as well, around 199 degrees. And then you don't get this problem. It goes out together in one form, in vapor form. So it's definitely not a good idea to go at I tested it at 180 degrees and I got something like 20% efficacy or 25. That's a very, not a good idea to do that.
Well, it's the chart that you presented earlier that has the different temperatures. If you look at the bottom, it's in Celsius typically, guys. And so for us Americans, 260 degrees Celsius is about 500 degrees Fahrenheit. And so the units are going to be preset for optimum for the unit that you purchase. And that kind of leads into another question that we have here. That Mike says it'll be interesting to see if he suggests adjusting the instant VAP settings. And then he says, Rob with the Larabis, every time we need parts from you, they do a great job. But, would you ever recommend adjusting the settings on an instant VAP, or do you guys already have them at optimal?
So these originals and the compacts are preset to 230, which is 445 Fahrenheit. And you can change up to 260, which is Fahrenheit on the original. I would say that probably I wouldn't go higher than, I would go a bit lower than that because I never really tested a lot whether, electronics and everything is working out great or you get a higher rate of failures, So that I didn't test on the original, but you can go higher. If you get any blockage issues, clogging issues, just ramp up the temperature, another 20 degrees Fahrenheit or whatever. And that will not cause any lesser, it will get just better as far as efficacy. The compact unit you cannot change, it's preset. And if I would change it, create a new program, a new PCB and so on, I need also higher wattage of heaters to compensate for the higher temperature. It would become slow to ramp up to that temperature and it would use up more capacity of battery because although it would vaporize fast, but then you would need to wait, another 15 seconds just until it's ready for the next treatment. And so I'm not planning to go back to old devices and start working them through because first of all, we have to wear a mask when we handle even a used device because when you do a lot of servicing, you open up a device, there's residues of oxalic acid there, and I can see on people that they have, they're coughing and so on, even from the dry oxalic acid. You open it up, there's a lot of oxalic acid left in the device, you have to remove that, clean it out, and it's just, and then I have to remove the heater, the PCB, and put in new ones. I remove, the heart of it. And so I'm really more pushing into if you have a used device, maybe it's better if you sell it as a used device and buy a new one. It's much better than trying to change everything in the old one.
If you wanted to get one that was adjustable, but I guess my question is what?
You still get around 60% efficacy compared to the 73. So it's not like, oh, I have to do it. You still survived with that. You did a good job. You were happy with it. Now that there is a better one, you don't need to really lessen the value of the previous one.
Sure. And for me, I just keep it the way it is and keep it simple on that. I don't I don't like messing with stuff I don't understand very well. But on the compact is what I've been typically using, and now I'm trying out this turbo. It's faster. I mean, it looks just like it, just with a couple extra features.
Yes.
So using it is quite the same, but looks like to me for these units, I don't see a whole lot of reason to change it unless maybe you're having an issue, like you said, maybe need to heat it up for maybe clogging of the barrel. But that would be something I would reach out to Rob or you about before I started messing around with one of these tools. They're very precise. I haven't ever had any issues. Obviously, there's tons of units out there, so someone will eventually have some issue, but I've never had any, and I use them a lot. So, another question: uh, how people ask about cleaning these things out and stuff. You already have a system of using distilled water um, periodically or at the end of the treatment to clean it out with the steam pressure of the water. And people ask, do I need to do anything besides that, or is that good enough?
Uh, I have beekeepers. I mean, it all depends on what purity of oxalic acid you use. If you use a bad purity one, it can leave, like a gluey, greenish stuff. You have to change then your source. I really recommend if you have local, and you are very lucky in US. You have the Epibioxel, which is clean,
Mhm.
but you also have the new ones, the tablet and the other one which you used and some other guys used on the videos. A lot of these is selling it. I mean, use that one because that will not leave these messy residues.
Mhm.
And then this cleaning cap is good enough. It just cleans out whatever is necessary. Uh, and some people just love, pouring in water. If it's cold, you can pour in water, but it should not go around. It should be very accurately just going in like through a nozzle or something like that to the device. You can shake it so that anything which was dissolved by the cleaning cap, you can then pour it out. Again, put in and put out. And what is really recommended, and it's in the user manual, is that after you cleaned it, you warm it back so that any residue of water is clean from the device. Because just imagine you put it away and you have an aluminum bowl, you have a stainless steel top, and that's the recipe for galvanic corrosion. So what can happen is that you are sealing it with a dispenser, it's there for months, you have an acid liquid there, which is constantly, trying to work like a battery. And for that, it tries to eat away material. And if your device is dry, put away dry, you can use it for 10 years, 20 years, nothing will happen. But if you always put it aside wet, then if you have the right concentration of acidity and a lot of issues, then sometimes you can get nasty results.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we do. You mentioned earlier some people who have poured water inaccurately into the unit, and it can get down in the insulation, and then you have to heat it for a very long time to get that moisture out of the
Or even
insulation.
you can't do that because you have to open up the device, remove the installation and try it out or change it because it just can't escape. And the way it escapes is it goes through small gaps to the circuit board, even if there are two holes, and then kills it. So it's better when you see that you are not able to warm up. It's better to remove the battery and then get service done than failing the electronics as well.
I see. So be
But
very
that's not
careful.
an issue with light, with compacts, with turbo. That's not an issue at all.
Okay, it's just the original.
Yes.
Okay, just the original. Um, so just be careful with the water. Dried out. Yeah, yesterday we were using it, and we just put a cap of water in there. Sometimes if we use it really hard, we use it in between the yards. So if we say have 36, 40 colonies to a yard, we go through every hive, and then we clean it. Then we'll go to the next yard. Then we use it again. Then we clean it. Then we go to another yard, and then we at the end of the day, we might run 2 cycles of cleaning it at the end, just 2 caps, just to do extra good. Then, like you said, heat it up all the way and get it nice and dry. And then we put it inside our military grade a can. I have one that Rob makes specifically for it, but you can also purchase some cans too, because sometimes, you know, when you're going from place to place, we do the same thing with our smokers. The units are still so hot, and you don't want to accidentally burn something or melt something. That wouldn't be fun. So more questions. Wally Fish says, thanks, Janos and Kamon. What about bicarb mix to rinse and clean? So I guess that would be baking soda or something like that.
I have no experience with that. I'm sure, you know, they usually use that for cleaning out your eyes and so on because it neutralizes. Even the distilled water is, I think the oxalic acid itself is acid enough that it will dissolve any residues of minerals if it happens. So I never use distilled water for cleaning it. When I did tests, a lot of tests, and I didn't use oxalic acid, but the water to cool down the device, I use distilled water, so I'm not like filling it up with those minerals, the device. So it cools down fast. But otherwise, I never had an issue with it.
Yeah, I would be concerned there might be some residues left over from the sodium bicarbonate. You just don't know. So oxalic acid turns to formic at 374, but yet you say the vaporizer is set for 400 something. Am I confused? So Alan, that was some information from a while past. Actually, the unit I'm using right now is 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Janos, do you mind explaining why that's okay?
Yeah, it was in the talk, but what is going on is that all this data that at 374 it turns to formic acid is based on a very slow warming up of a sample, 10 degrees per minute, and then they look at the weight loss and they look at, you know, this is the TGA measurement. And that has no reference to us because they are not putting in the oxalic acid into a hot environment, but they're very gradually warming it up. It takes like 18 minutes or 19 minutes to warm up and then get it completely decomposed. And when you put it into a hot environment, it behaves completely differently because it becomes vaporizing very fast. And then if you do it at, let's say, 400 degrees, 2 grams takes more than a minute. So already it starts to decompose at that temperature, but it stays there for a long time, so more will decompose. If you do it at higher temperature, then it goes out very fast, although it's a higher temperature, more heat shock, but still ends up being less decomposing. And if you go out at very extreme temperatures, which you can look back on the graph and calculate what is that in Fahrenheit, then you get very low efficacy because there is a point where it starts to just, it's too much for the oxalic acid. Even if it goes out fast, it's just too much stress for it and it will decompose. And mainly at higher temperature, it decomposes to formic acid, and at lower temperatures, it decomposing to carbon monoxide. You can actually lighten it up and it will burn. You can see that's carbon monoxide.
Well, thank you for that answer. And this is the important information we needed a long time ago, is knowing how it relates to our industry specifically instead of a lab test, because we're outdoors dealing with a lot of different conditions. And obviously, we're not taking dozens of minutes. Nowadays, we're taking hopefully not even dozens of seconds. And so that leads me kind of my next question, a question I get from a lot of people. Is they hear all of this different information. How many grams should be used? And there's a legal amount, and in every country is a little bit different. So I'm going to say that. But if you had to say, as the creator of the Instant Vap, I have a 2 deep colony or 1 deep box, what would you recommend with your units that would be a good dose of oxalic acid?
Yes, it's a big question. And I was changing in that as I was speaking to a lot of beekeepers. First of all, I think it was Bob Benny interviewing someone from the University of Georgia when they were telling, and also probably another guy you interviewed a couple of months or maybe a year ago. I try to remember, Cameron Jack, or I don't remember his name. Anyway, they were doing some studies about what is the optimum quantity per deep box or whatever. And what they did, they used, I believe, when I looked at the test report, the ProVap 110 device, and they were putting in more and more oxalic acid at the preset temperature of 230, which is 445. And what they didn't take into account is, as they are cooling down more and more the device, and it depends on a lot also the ambient temperature outside. If it's windy and 10 degrees, that will be struggling. I'm sure that you remember that these devices, no insulation, not even a shield around. You can get a constant clogging if you get a windy weather and it's 50 degrees ambient outside Fahrenheit. So they didn't take it into account. So as they introduced more and more oxalic acid, they got lower and lower efficacy. I'm 100% sure of that. And they may end up giving less oxalic acid with the 4-gram dose compared to when they gave the 2-gram dose or the 1 gram. And that is just falsifying completely those results. And once I saw these tests, I knew about that. But anyway, so I don't trust those results. I have the experience that in Hungary, until recently, most of the beekeepers just vaporize like more than 90%, and that's by and large in Europe, 2 grams per colony, whatever is the size. If it's very small, nucleus hive, they may go a bit lower, but not much. And just recently, I get the feedback from some commercial beekeepers in Hungary. One of them is, like 2,000 plus colonies, that he did 3-gram treatments with the turbo. And he said that he got a very good control of mites after a round of treatment. He treated 2 times a week, and he was going as long as he dropped less than 10 mites after the treatment. And he started up with higher mite counts, and he ended up very low in the end, and he was very happy with it. So he's not saving on the battery. He vaporized 3 grams. I know that in US, most of you are vaporizing 4 grams. With the 4 grams, your efficacy goes down a little bit. So it may be, if you do 3 grams, you're very close to 4 grams actually, because as you are cooling down more and more your vaporizer, you are losing on efficacy. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I have never seen any significant drawback when you vaporize more. So it's not like you are damaging the colony or the brood and so on. So it's more a question of, and that's why I was telling you that I want these experiments done when there is broodless period, and then you get a very good picture when you do repeated treatments with different quantities. And you can do that experiment. You don't need a university and degrees and somebody telling you what is the result. You can do it. You have enough colonies, most of you, and you get a feeling of what is going on. And that data can be used then not only for the final treatment, or end of your treatment when you want to cut back, but even if you want to use oxalic acid during the year to combat mites and not other stuff, then you know how many days apart, how many grams you need to use to achieve a good result. And I can tell you my experience is that only with 20 colonies, so that's not a lot. But when I treated my bees for 4 years with oxalic acid, I didn't use anything else, only oxalic acid vaporization. I had to vaporize them around June. Our climate is similar to yours, around June, 6-7 times, 3 days apart. Then after sunflower, which is like middle of August, another round of treatment. And then in autumn, once less and less brood came, then I treated them. And then when it was winter time, like even snow, but the bees started flying because it reached like 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees ambient in Celsius degrees. When they came out for cleansing flight or something like that, then I always try to use that opportunity to treat them, and assuming that there was no brood. And I survived with that without any colony loss. Now, some years are very bad with mites, some years are much better. I'm not trying to kind of tell people that exactly you follow this and you will get a good result. That's why we have the mite washing kit and so on, to get an idea and treat accordingly. And I was wrong in that I always just went by the rule which I made and not by was it necessary to treat. I think it's important to get an idea and not just treat mindlessly.
Well, and that's, everyone needs to be monitoring, and there's a lot of information out there. For example, the information that's been going around for a long time about What are the safe ranges to vaporize at? And how much dosage should we use? And for a while, it was 1 gram is what the university said. It's also what was legal to use here in the United States. But quickly, we knew that 1 gram was not enough. And it wasn't just 1 gram wasn't enough. It also was, we had vaporizers that was degrading a lot of that oxalic acid. The original vaporizers we used here in the United States were pan vaporizers that would heat up that oxalic acid over an 8 to 10 minute period and slowly cook that at a low temperature, which we now know actually is not the best way to do it. Not just from a time standpoint, but also from an oxalic acid a degradation standpoint. And so as we continue to learn more about oxalic acid, a lot of the old conceived ideas are going away, but that's really what we need as we encounter more problems like, tropo lapse and stuff. We need to not only understand the mites, we also have to understand the products that we're using, and we need to understand our seasons. Here in Tennessee, my mite growth throughout the year is extremely different from beekeepers that are in New York or Minnesota. Same thing, beekeepers in Florida can't watch my videos and do exactly what I'm doing because their bees never stop brooding in Florida. And so we all have to take a certain degree of a scientific approach to not only using our tools, but managing our bees and monitoring what's going on. And ultimately, when we do that, we're going to really dial in what works for our area. And now we're going to be able to get the most out of the instant vap and our bees, and ultimately usually run into that problem, which is great, that we have too many bees and don't know what to do with all of them. It's a good problem to have. So Chris, there was another question. There's a let's see here.
Which one are you looking for? I have them here.
We'll just go ahead and throw one up.
Okay, Rob answered one. I'll throw this up here. There's Mr. Richard coming in from lovely France.
I vaporized 2.5 grams twice, same time, up the row and down for the second treatment. That way the machine keeps its efficacy, and it's technically a 5-gram dose. And so, Richard, is that a 2-deep colony, I assume, that you're treating, or is that just a blanket? Even if it's a single, you just hit it all? Like Janos said, I've done a lot of different things. I've done as much as 8 grams per colony, so 4 grams per brood chamber. And in our testing for that period, that was the best mite knockback. I did see some brood disruption, actually, but it quickly, within a brood cycle, straightened itself out, and it actually got me really good efficacy. But now that I'm using these compacts and turbos, I've actually backed off to about 2 to 3 grams per brood chamber. So I do about 5 grams, 4 to 5 grams if I have a double deep colony. And that seems to be working really well for me. And it's especially when they're broodless in December, which, in my opinion, anyone who's not using oxalic acid or some type of tool in those periods of broodlessness in winter is really missing an opportunity there. Because if I come out of winter with 100 mites, well, I start brooding in February. 100 turns into 200, excuse me, in a 21-day cycle. That's where I was going. And then it's 400 typically, and then it's 800, 1,600, and you can see how quickly the mite population grows. But if I, in that broodless period with the very affordable oxalic acid crystals, I can reduce that 100 down to 15 mites. That gives me a much longer period before I'm having damage to my colony. And then we typically are doing treatments again in early summer because we find just much, much greater success keeping the mites low, never letting them get out of control, never having to, that one treatment at the end of the season, having to bring us back from the brink of colony loss. And what we're finding, I did another video yesterday with Laurel, and we just have these colonies that are stupid large because the mites just do not affect them at all when you keep them this low. And I'm drawing brood chambers right now. I'm drawing combs out, and not just a couple here and there. I'm drawing a lot of comb. I used to never could draw comb. I haven't had nectar since the second week of June, and I think we'll probably start here in about a week or so with the goldenrod. but because we're controlling our mites so well, we're seeing productivity unlike that we've seen before. But it's all very dialed in, and understanding what's going on is very critical. Chris, you got another one?
Here's this one.
There's a paper in the Journal of Insect Scientists from 2023 that discusses treating every 5 to 7 days having a higher efficacy than every 3 days. Have you tried that treatment schedule? I have.
I'm hesitant to agree with that, because what I can see is that the efficacy of oxalic acid drops after 2-3 days. It's really getting low. Yes. You can see the mite drop. If you treat again, you can see you have again a lot of mite drop. So you have the mice there, they are going under the cappings and they're multiplying. So you are just extending the problem, you're not solving it. You may be delaying it 1 month, but you're not solving it. And 5-7 days, I tell people, if you have a normal colony, not a huge mite load, try to treat every 3 days. If something happens, you can't go out, then you treat on the 4th day. That's still better than if you shoot to the 5 or 7 days. I mean, I had a big customer. He vaporized 37 times in summertime and he was still not winning. And he was vaporizing, he tried to vaporize, he had 2,000 colonies every week, to get there every week. And it was never a success. And now he treats 2 times a week, which is like 3.5 days. And he got very good success. So I can't agree with that.
Sure.
I think Randy said that if you treat once a week, then you just keep your mite level. That's what I saw in one of his studies. But even that is maybe true for low mite levels and keeping it there, but not having high mite load. And that would still explode if you just treat once a week.
Yes, and that's the problem, is we don't have near enough data on this, and it's a very complicated issue, because where is your mite load starting at? What time of the season are you treating at? Because if you're in a spring type condition, which means tons of resources, that means you also are raising a lot of drones, and so you have a lot of mites on those drones, in those drone cells, and that changes the dynamics of where the mites are at. And then later in the season, that's something that we see here in Tennessee, where by late August, we do have some drones, but it's a fraction of the drones that we had in early June or May. And so that's where it's so critical to not have high mite loads, because it's the nurse bees that are taking a big hit and the next generation that's taking the big hit. And so as we're trying to treat in June versus trying to treat in August, there's just differences on the levels where the mites are at. So there's just several variables there. And then also, when we were doing tests years ago, 2 years back to back, we took a full yard of 40 colonies and we were doing 5 rounds in 21 days. So it was very intense. And we were doing higher than legal doses at that time, because the beekeepers knew a long time before it became legal that 1 gram was not enough. We were seeing much better success with higher levels. So I was doing about 5 to 6 grams per double deep on these colonies, 5 rounds, 21 days. I was using a ProVap vaporizer. I never could get 70% knockdown either of the years. I was in the 60% range. However, we've also learned that part of the problem with the ProVap model is that the temperature dropped, and it was very it fluctuated, because it is a band. This is the older ProVap. It has the bands on the side, and so
did you treat as one big dose or in several smaller doses?
One big dose. You just fill the cup up and then pop it on and shoot it off. So I think based off of your charts, I was getting a lot of degradation.
Yes, maybe you got 20% efficacy, and like 2 times, let's say 6 grams is still only 3 grams in actually no, 2 times 6 grams, 1.2 grams you get on the output. So that's not a lot.
So yeah, exactly. And that's the problem with not knowing, is that you think you're doing something and you're not. And so that's where that information that I had had I been using a different vaporizer and a different temperature, it's not just the temperature, but also your models, they're insulated. And so it's a steady temperature. It doesn't have a massive drop and then heat up
We have
period.
an inch thick bottom, and you have the heater on the bottom. So whenever, and the sensor also just under the surface. So it senses a temperature drop right away, 100% heating on, and it right away generates back the heat. So it's not like there's a lot of time difference before the heat arrives to the bottom. So anyway, it's just what is interesting about beekeeping is that Sublimox started his device in I believe it was in Italy back in, I don't know, 2011 or something like that, so a long time ago. And then everybody just started to copy that. Copy, copy, copy. And nobody thought over, is there a better way of doing it? And yeah, so I had an easy job to it because yeah.
Well, and it's not that yes, anyone who thinks that I'm or anybody is trying to say anything negative about other companies, I appreciate Janos open sourcing this information. And that was something that he talked to me about, that this information, anybody can watch this video, other companies can watch this video, learn from the data that the scientists over there have collected. And Randy Oliver and anyone else who's contributed to this project, they can look at this information and go and create a vaporizer that is more efficient and protects the oxalic acid more. And so, again, that's where people ask about 5 rounds in 21 days or how much oxalic acid to use. A lot of this information you're seeing online is old. It's old information. It was not that long ago. It was super common for everyone to say just one oxalic acid treatment a week for 3 weeks, and you've got 90% of your mites, which was hogwash. But that was common knowledge 10 years ago. And so you've got to really be careful with reading a lot of the old stuff. And that's where we've got to continue to educate ourselves and keep pushing the boundaries on this, because we can't afford to be complacent and assume that the work has been done. At the end of the day, results matter. And we've got to, for our bees' sake, and also for running a business, or if you're running a hobby, we've got to make sure that we take care of our bees. It's no different than taking care of any pet. We have a responsibility to do our best, and that means taking the time to monitor. And Janos, you've given a great presentation, but go out and do it in your own yard and do your mite washes. And again, trust but verify is the best way to do it. And that's how we knew that things were amiss, because people were telling us, came in 5 rounds of 21 days. That's way too much oxalic acid. That's way too many treatments. You don't need to do that. And we were doing alcohol washes before we started, and we were doing alcohol washes after things were over, and we were visibly seeing over 40 hives. This was not working good enough. It just slowed things down. And so from there, I was able to go, okay, what can I do to make this more effective? And one of the things that we started doing is making splits in June when our honey flow is over, and we put a queen cell in one. And so what we do, we put them in queen cell protectors. So we treat with oxalic acid on the day we make the split, put the queen cell with the queen cell protectors so they can't damage the cell. And then we let it go through its period, and we come back around the time she should be laying, but hasn't capped her brood yet. And then we'll hit them one more time. And so we don't always get a complete broodless period, but we get 90% of the mites exposed in that process. And it allows us in 1 or 2 vaporizations to just almost reset the mite population in that split. So it's a combination of having good tools, but also having good techniques to go with the tools. And as beekeepers, we've got to really use our brains a little bit, in my opinion. And it really helps. And you can create some systems. So we're going to take just a couple more questions, and we all have to consider that it's very late for Janos over there in Hungary. You're 7 hours difference.
I'm still okay. Yeah, thankfully I'm still okay.
You're still alive. That's good to know. So this has been used all over the place. So when I'm using the Instant Vap Turbo, I haven't really paid much attention, but all I know is I drop the oxalic acid. The temperature probably drops just a hair, but then of course within around 10 seconds with a 2-gram dose, it's ready for me to treat again. And so it can't be dropping that much. So
It does drop, like it does drop, but it's very fast heating back. So because it's 400 watts, it's much faster. One thing, and the other thing is that it senses the temperature drop very early, and then also what is great about the compact and the turbo is that you don't need to watch the screen and think about it whether you finish the treatment or not. Maybe if the sun is shining, you don't see or you can't put on your glasses because of the mask. You can't see the screen. You shade it with your hand, and it just slows you down. And what I saw in the US is that people waited until it went back to 230 or 445, which was the default settings, and they lost maybe 5-7 seconds just staring at it when it was already finished, and you could have gone to the next colony, prepared the dosage, and then don't wait. And that meant that they used much less, they vaporized much less with the same amount of amp-hour battery. And then I thought, I need to change this, but I can't educate everyone how to do it. It's just too slow, that, oh, don't do that, go faster and this and that. But people are not watching these videos. So what I did, I put in a program, it looks at the temperature drop. From that, it calculates how much oxalic acid you put in. And it knows that, if the temperature drop was 20 degrees, then it will take 7 seconds or 10 seconds or 15, depending on the device, to vaporize that. After that, it goes back to slow blinking from the fast blinking. So you know that you can pull it out, go to the next colony, prepare the dosage, and when it goes on to solid on, then you are ready to go. And this already people felt like it's a much faster device. It's a much better device. Actually, it was the same heating, same everything, only I started thinking instead of them. And that makes sense. I mean, we should not concentrate on is it ready or not, just look at an LED and it makes it easier. And that's why I kept it in the turbo. Even if I have the screen, you're not staring at the screen, but you're just looking at an LED. And it was much harder to do it with the turbo because you can change the temperature to 230, 240, 250, 260, and it had to work at each temperature, this monitoring of when is it ready. So that was much harder to achieve.
So there's so much to this. So, and it's awesome. It's also mind blowing. When I first talked to you, this is something that I'm going to segue just a little bit here, because one of the things that I deal with a lot because of the North American Honeybee Expo and the YouTube channel is every day. This morning it happened, and throughout the day, we have people from all over the world who are trying to sell us honey. They're trying to sell us bee suits. They're trying to sell us vaporizers. They're trying to sell us all kinds of things. And most of them are knockoff versions or just plain garbage. And we won't get into that. However, you reached out to me and a few other people here in the U.S. A handful of years ago, and was talking about your vaporizer. And I was very busy. And honestly, since 90% of the stuff that gets thrown towards us is just absolute not worth any of our time, and then very little of the other 10% is actually something that's exciting, I just kind of like, whatever. And eventually we connected, Rob and you connected, and then Rob reached out to me and said, hey, what do you think about this Instant Vap product? And I said, I don't really know much about it. And so I reached out to you, you reached out to me, we connected, and then you shared with me and talked to me for about an hour and a half, showing me the inner parts of the original model and why it should have wires of this gauge, why this should not be corrosive here, and all this. And I didn't understand some of it, but my mind definitely was blown by a lot of it, because you could tell you spent a lot of time, put a lot of thought into it. And it was exciting to see somebody who is passionate for something that, as an operation of a couple hundred colonies, I need the best products. If I'm going to spend my money, I want something that's going to work good. I want something that's enjoyable to use. I want something that is going to benefit my bees as good as possible. And so from there, you started selling through Larabi's here in the United States, and they've swept the nation. So there's so many of them at the expo that sell. And by the way, any of you guys who are watching this, there's always a really good price for instant vat models at the expo. There's a expo price, and so if you're going to come to that event, maybe pick up another one or your first one there and save a few dollars. But it's really impressive over the last just handful of years how you've gone from your first couple of models to now you are all over. How many countries are you in, Janos, at this point?
I don't know, but it's like imagining that I'm in Japan and New Zealand and Australia and US and Canada. I mean, probably like 15 countries or 20 countries. I don't monitor that, but it's getting more and more because people just realize that the old method is not working.
Mm-hmm.
And I get sometimes very interesting, like small countries calls, let's talk it through and so on. They want to introduce it. It's getting bigger and bigger as people are learning about it. And it is a shame, and it shocks me that in US, we still have, and in many countries in Europe, 50% mortality rate of colonies in winter.
Yeah.
That kills like most of the beekeepers in the first couple of years, because your wife will not allow you to buy always new colonies. I experienced that, and it's just, and you can do it right. You're not just beekeepers, but mite keepers. Mm-hmm. And we have to manage that even more than the bees, because you can be a bad beekeeper and make less honey, still be happy because you don't know what you're losing out on. But if you are a bad mite management person, you will not be a beekeeper at all. Yes. And that's the sad story. We are first of all mite management persons and then beekeepers.
There's a twofold problem that we have here in the United States, and I've been watching some of the folks in Australia, and I'm really concerned that they're going to be humans just like the rest of us and repeat the process over and over again, because the United States did not do a good job of learning from Europe as they were dealing with varroa mites. And when it got over here, we weren't prepared. It reshaped our industry in a lot of ways. Several multi-generational businesses went out of business, and the information was there. We just weren't we just had to relearn it ourselves for whatever reason. And Australia really needs to learn from the United States and Europe and New Zealand, and not wait to the last minute. We do this so terribly here in the United States. We wait till August. We wait till September to treat. And in some areas you can do that. If you're further up north and your bees, and there's a lot of variables. If your bees swarm, or if you split your bees a lot, that's going to break up the mite population. There are some bees that are more resistant, but very, very few people are actually doing that on a true level. And most of the people just say, it's, and I used to be a treatment-free beekeeper. I know these groups, I know these people, and it's beyond just, I want to be a treatment-free beekeeper. It's a religion. And for many of them, it's the dogma is such that they don't really know. They don't do alcohol washes. They don't know what their mite loads are. And I've seen several that will post pictures of their broods saying, well, this is a European foul brood that took out my bees. And they're like, anything can kill my hives besides varroa. It can't be varroa. Maybe it was European foul brood. Maybe it was this. But you can look at the brood and see where it's viruses and high loads of mites that are causing the problem. And I have several friends who are working to create better bees. Randy Oliver is one of them. So I'm not trying to diss the goal of good genetics. I think there will always be a need for good genetics, good treatments, monitoring. It's a balance of all these things. But the problem that we have here is we have two groups. One who really believes that using any treatment at all it's a terrible sin, and I disagree with that fully. Oxalic acid is a very organic chemical. It's something we're all exposed to. I like to eat a lot of salads. I get tons of oxalic acid in my salads, whether I want it or not. So it's part of the natural process. but we wait so late. So the treaters are waiting too late. The non-treaters aren't treating enough. And if they want to get on that goal of not being treatment free, they need to monitor. We might have 10 colonies, maybe only 3 of them make the grade. And so, okay, we are going to treat the other 7, and we are going to requeen those with the good genetics to kind of work towards that goal of better bees. But we all need to be doing a better mite management, and it's so avoidable. If we start hitting mites months before they become a problem, every 100 mites that we kill could be 600 to 1,000 mites later in the season that we don't have to deal with, and our bees don't have to deal with. And right now in September, in my area, this is the push. This momentum is so critical for that winter cluster. And so if our bees are suffering from especially viruses or high mite loads causing young mortality with our bees because they've been fed on in the cell, we're going to have very small clusters, or we're going to have no bees at all that make it into winter. And so it's just very frustrating. But there's so much misinformation out there. Janos, I did a test a few years ago. We took Italian packages that we received in April. They're 3 pounds of bees, and the queens were good. The bees looked very healthy. We weren't seeing any issues. We installed 52 packages at the same rate. We balanced them out for the first 2 months so that all of them were about the same size 2 months later in June. And then there in June, we did an alcohol wash, and we couldn't hardly find a single mite in any of the washes. The colonies looked beautiful. We'd fed them up to draw a new comb. The queens, of course, were young. Then we came back 2 months later in August and did a wash again. In August, we averaged a little over 1.5%. So the bees looked fantastic. And if you weren't a knowledgeable beekeeper, heck, even if you were a knowledgeable beekeeper, just to look into those colonies, it's gorgeous brood patterns. The population looks good. Everything looks fine. But then we took it and broke it up into 4 groups. One of those groups of 13 didn't get any treatments at all, the control group. And we came back and we did an alcohol wash on it the last week of September. And we were seeing mites, like a couple of them sampled over 100 mites in a wash. And we had some that were like 60 and 70. And of course, the other groups were in treatment classes, and they did much better because they were treated. This is what people don't understand about mites, is that they grow so exponentially. And then there's also this biological event that happens later in the year where you have the drone population drop in these regions. So there's a shift of mites from drones to workers. So our workers are getting hit harder. The drones kind of take a lot of the abuse for the early parts of the season. So we don't really see it in the bees that matter the most. And then, go ahead.
And also your colony population goes down, so per bee you get much more mites.
100%.
And yeah, and the other issue is, even if you knock them down, the viruses stay with that generation. That goes down much slower. So you might end up with no mites at all and still the colony dying because they are just too, the immunity of that colony is just not able to hold up and dies.
Yes, and a lot of times, we're only in there for little windows. We get to see just a snippet of the bees' experiences. If we check every 2 weeks, it depends on the season, what I'm doing. Sometimes I'm in there every week. Sometimes I might not be in a colony for up to 3 weeks, but I really try to have a 2-week schedule, because if there's any type of event, whether it's a queenless event or any type of issue, I have time to fix it at that point. If it's a month, I mean, a lot of times they're almost too far gone to fix if it's a really bad, they've been queenless for 4 weeks. It's not, especially late in the season, there's just no fixing that if they're really too far gone with old bees. But that's where we're only seeing snippets of things throughout the months. And by the time some of us realize what's going on, it's too late for fixing. If I go into a colony in September and go, oh man, these bees are getting beat up by the mites, I'm going to have an extremely hard time saving that colony. No matter what I throw at, the damage is already done. bees are living shorter lives. They already live only about 5 to 6 weeks in the best case scenario. In the dearth periods of summer, they feed them less, so they naturally live shorter during those periods. And then if the infestation goes up and the natural bee population goes down, which it does during that time, we just have several compounding factors that really hurt us. So keeping those mite loads low early, chipping away with maybe vaporizations at opportune moments. Whenever we catch a swarm, whether it's our own bees or some other bees, we always install them, give them some feed. We come back about 7 or 8 days, no less than 8 days after installation, and we do an oxalic acid vaporization. And it is shocking. Not anymore to me, but it used to be shocking. I'll put a sticky board underneath and watch the mite drop from those swarms, and we'll get 400, 500 mites that'll drop in a good 300 or 400 pound swarm. And it varies on the swarms, but you just think of how much relief you just shed from those bees, where mites can double every brood cycle. So, not all of those mites would be viable. Let's say out of 500, 400 of them are. Well, that's going to be 800 mites after another brood cycle. And then over, 15, 1600. And so that's the problem that we have here in the United States, is a giant population of people who don't fully understand the dynamics of Varroa, aren't taking the time to treat earlier in the season, hitting the mites before they ever cause a problem. And because of that, we're experiencing these high losses. And I will add one more thing. Some of these losses here in the United States are overblown. We still were able to do all the pollination that was required. There some bottlenecking? Yes, there was. But all the hobby beekeepers were still able to buy nucleus colonies like they wanted to. I didn't see the prices even go up to any significant degree beyond what it normally does from year to year. We still had packages. We still had queens. There was a certain degree of this U.S. bee losses that was just overblown, overstated. And we, in the commercial industry, it's not different from the hobbyists. There are some commercial guys who are really dialed in. Some of these guys know so much about how to use formic acid and different products. They're super dialed in. But we have some of those guys that are cowboys, and they throw everything in. They don't understand timing. They don't understand what the treatment's doing, and therefore they have these big losses. And well, there's some type of mysterious new thing going on. And sometimes there is, but sometimes it's just bad beekeeping. And I think that's the only thing we can control, to be honest, Janos. If a new something comes along, we can't control that. But we can control how good our beekeeping is. That's the number one problem in beekeeping right now, is people aren't taking full advantage of the things they could do for their bees. So I got on my little rant right there. I apologize. I'm very passionate about this. We need people who are just monitoring, learning for themselves. Don't listen to that Kamon Reynolds guy on YouTube. Don't listen to Janos. Don't listen to all those guys. Go out into your bee yard and do your own tests. And then you can weigh what we've said and see if it works. And if it does, it does. And if not, now you have the beginnings to solve your own problems. And we try to give you the best information. We're doing our best. I don't live in Canada and never plan to. It's too cold. I like my mild, muddy winters. So Greg Burns says, he's thrown a ridiculous amount of time and money towards treatment-free bees. Great ROI on oxalic acid vaporization. I think, again, genetics are important, and I'm not knocking the guys who do it right. I know Greg isn't either, but we look at tomatoes, we look at apple trees, we look at all agriculture. We look at even nature. There's new pests that come in. There's new viruses. There's new bacteria. There's just all kinds of things that come in. They want to survive as much as our bees do, and they're fighting to do that and micro evolve into stronger versions of themselves. And as beekeepers, we have to fight that. And bees are super healthy and nutritious critters. Hornets love to eat them. Yellow jackets, dragonflies, birds love to eat them. All these things love to eat them because bees are plentiful and they're super healthy for their diets. And so I can't blame them for doing that. But as their caretaker, I may nuke some of those things out when I get the chance with a vaporizer. Janos, I know It's so late, and it's got to be close to midnight your time. Oh, yeah, it's just getting there.
45 minutes.
45 minutes.
Yes.
Chris, do we have any more really pertinent questions, or should we let our guest go?
No, I didn't see anything like overly specific. I think Janos has answered all of them. So
Yeah, he's kind of crushed a lot of those questions.
Maybe it was a bit like I included maybe too much in this presentation. But people can go back and watch that couple of graphs, and I really enjoyed learning all this. And like I had to call a friend to explain to him, about why I think that at higher temperatures what happens and so on. It becomes exciting once you get involved. But what really we need to get home today is that it's not enough to have a fast device. It's not enough that you get some mild drops. You really need to get a device. And I'm not saying that Instant Vap is the only at all. That's not the message. But you have to make sure that you are using a good device and at a good temperature, so you are getting a good efficacy when you are treating and not just fooling yourself and in the end hurting yourself. That's the message. And because I had like even YouTubers, there was a dear lady in US making a couple of videos about that I killed her bees with formic acid because I was vaporizing, giving the vaporizer at 445 degrees, and that he looked at Randy Oliver's web page, and I was introducing too much formic acid, and 100% that's the case. And even if I reached out, I couldn't convince her that that's not the case. And it's just it's really important that as much as possible we try to learn these things so that we can forget the arguments about it, and go on and learn new things and get better at things, and not just go back to the same issue, and each beekeeping generation is falling into the same trap and damaging themselves.
Well said. That's 100% of the case. We've got to make it a point to educate all of us with the information, so that our bee club members know it, and the new beekeepers that come in, they learn it, and we can continue to go forward beyond what we know now into the next realms, because the next challenges are on the way. You mentioned tropolalaps, and that's the new frontier. We've got to have a good defense for that. And Janos, I appreciate you already looking into that and working on that. And in any way that we as U.S. beekeepers can help you guys, whether that's resources, funding, let me know, because that is of critical importance to our industry, all bee industries. But we don't want to be caught down with our pants down like we were with Varroa. I have too many friends in this industry. I have too many companies in this industry that are friends of mine, and I don't want to see them, and I don't want to see tropolalaps ruin my bee operation either. So any way that we can help you guys, you're on the front lines. You're only a couple countries away from that problem.
I see that oxalic acid will not be the solution, at least this vaporization. It's just too much job. And what is good is that whatever I hope I will be able to develop for tropolalaps will also work for the varroa, because whatever kills the tropolalaps will kill the varroa as well. So in the future, I will not concentrate fully on oxalic acid, because I will just fool myself if I think that's the solution. I gave a device to a guy in UK. He went some to Georgia, some to Indonesia, and they tested with Instant Vap, because everybody's testing formic acid, so they thought they will jump on oxalic acid. And you have to just treat them every 5 days, and that's not an option, I think. It's just too short. Also, if they use extended release, the problem is they stay out so short, they don't get the right amount of dosage that it's efficacious. And that will be true for every other, like extended release pads or whatever is on the right. So I think we really need to look into other things which can battle them, and I will try to do that.
At one point, no one was using oxalic acid, and in any form. And so there could be new organic products out there, and there could be or there could be better deliveries for other things that we have. So it's a it's a scary time, but it's also an exciting time, and this is the time that we were born into, and we have a responsibility, I think, to take on these challenges with positivity and with hope. That's the way I look at this, and just do our best. So, like I said, Janos, we really appreciate you not just going, hey, this Instant Vaporizational is a great product. We're going to keep it like this, even though we know there's better ways of doing it. But you've constantly looked at your product critically and said, you know what? People have said this would be nice. And then you do it, or you yourself have gone, this would be more convenient. And quickly you have evolved the vaporizing market years and years into the future, and now have gone beyond that to helping us understand the oxalic acid dynamics and degradation, so that all of us, other companies, people who maybe even decide to sit at home and make their own. There's a few people that enjoy that kind of thing, but now they have the information to be able to make a better device for themselves. So thank you for sharing. And go
It's a
ahead.
privilege that you shared your audience with me, and we could talk about this. I mean, I hope really that it will be some benefit to the beekeepers.
We've had several wonderful comments on the side, and thousands of beekeepers will watch this in the future. I'm going to be seeing you at Apamondia in Denmark, so I'm going to get to meet you in person for the first time, so that will be very fun. And of course, I've never been outside of North America. I've barely dipped my toe into Canada before, but they're basically just northern Americans almost. I mean, it's, especially in Alberta, they're very much just beekeeping, farming type folks, the ones I dealt with, and super nice. But I'm interested in meeting some of you European beekeepers and seeing the different ways that you do things, and just having some good camaraderie and laughter. I hope that they like to laugh over there, because I'm a goofball and they're going to have to get over it, I suppose. But
hope to see you soon, and thank you very much.
All right, Janos, have a good night. Thank you, sir. Everyone, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.
Thank you. Bye-bye.